Well, you guys seem to like the challenge build video I did a few months ago, so I decided to do another one. In this video, I'm going to be challenging myself to build the best character I can with no equipment. So that means no weapons, no armor, and if I do get spells, I can't take any spells that have material components. So let's go ahead and get started with the race. We want to go with an elf race because we're going to be picking up elven accuracy in this build. I think Shatter Kai is the best choice for us here because our defenses are going to be lacking a little bit since we can't use armor. So the Blessing of the Raven Queen should help make up for that. And our ability scores, assuming point buy, are going to be a strength of 8, a dexterity of 15, plus 2 from our race for a total of 17, a constitution of 14, an intelligence of 8, a wisdom of 14, and a charisma of 12, plus 1 for a total of 13. And if you're rolling for ability scores, I would prioritize dexterity first, wisdom second, and constitution third, but make sure you have at least a 13 in charisma for multiclassing. This is the part of the build where I usually talk about ideal equipment, but our character is going to have no equipment for their whole career. I think this build would actually be pretty good in a game where the DM isn't giving out a lot of gold or magic items. This build is pretty decent just by itself. And starting off at level 1, we're going to be taking a level of fighter. For our fighting style, we're unsurprisingly going to be going with unarmed fighting. This is pretty much the best fighting style we can use without equipment, and it'll help us keep up with the weapon users in terms of damage. And then we'll get second wind. It's a D10 plus our fighter level. In healing, we can use once per short rest. If you're about to take a short rest, make sure you use this if you haven't already, since you get it back right after the short rest. And then for levels 2 through 6, we're going to be taking 5 levels of monk, which I assume is the class most of you expected when you clicked on this video. Probably the most obvious class to be taken with no equipment. We'll get unarmored defense. Eventually our AC will be decent with this feature. Right now it's not great, but it's the best we can do with no equipment. And then we'll get martial arts. We obviously won't be using monk weapons, but this will let us make unarmed strikes as a bonus action after we take the attack action. And then we'll get ki, the most important option being flurry of blows. This is our best damage option at level 2, but once we get our subclass that will change, at least until we're about level 11 in monk. The other two options, patient defense and step of the wind, are okay, and they'll be good in certain situations. We'll get unarmored movement. This is a welcome increase to our speed, which we'll make good use of when we're trying to get into melee. And then for our monastic tradition, we're going to be going with Way of Mercy. First up, we get Hands of Healing. If you use this feature along with Flurry of Blows, which you probably should, it's pretty much just a healing word with the range of touch. Very nice to have. If an ally goes unconscious next to you, you can just spend one of your attacks to bring them back up. And then secondly, we'll get Hands of Harm, which is actually much better than Flurry of Blows in terms of damage. This is because it has a much higher chance to hit. Each of our attacks has a 60% chance to hit, assuming we're up against a 16 AC. And if we're using Hands of Harm, we only need 1 of 3 of those to hit to apply the damage, which our chance to hit with at least 1 of 3 attacks is 93.6%, which is much higher than just that base 60% chance, which would be our chance to hit with that 4th attack from Flurry of Blows. Hands of Harm is actually still better even if we have advantage on all of our attacks. If you really need to do a lot of damage, you could use this and Flurry of Blows, but I would usually just use Hands of Harm to try to conserve your key points. Then back to base monk features, we'll get Deflect Missiles. This could be an okay option for reducing damage as your reaction, but it's rarely going to be worth the key points to throw it back. And then we'll get our first ability score increase or feat, and we're going to go with Elven Accuracy, like I talked about in the intro. We'll take that +1 to dexterity, bringing us to an 18. This will be a nice boost to our damage when we do have advantage. And then we'll pick up Extra Attack, and lastly we'll pick up Stunning Strike. While this looks great on paper, it's usually not very good in practice, since a lot of monsters have Constitution as their highest saving throw. If a monster has a low Constitution score, it can be quite strong, but otherwise you'll have to use this 3 to 4 times to get it to stick once, and that's usually just not worth the amount of key points, especially for the amount of damage you could be doing with that many key points with Hands of Harm. But nonetheless, it's still a nice tool to have in our arsenal and a great way to get advantage if it does stick. And at level 7, we're going to be multiclassing again. We're going to be taking 1 level of Warlock here. For our otherworldly patron, we're going to be going with Genie. Genie's Wrath being the main thing we're here for, to get our proficiency bonus in extra damage once per turn. It doesn't really matter too much which damage type you choose. The Dao option, being magical bludgeoning, is probably the most reliable, but I think the other ones are all fine as well. And then we'll get Bottled Respite, which gives us enough time to take a short rest inside of our Genie's vessel. This will be really nice in a dungeon or something where it's hard to find a safe spot. And then for spells, Hex would be nice, but unfortunately it takes material components, so you can just take whatever spells you'd like. For levels 8 and 9, we're going to be multi-classing again, and we're taking 2 levels of Cleric. For our Divine Domain, we're going to be going with War. The main reason is because we want the domain spell, Divine Favor. This spell adds damage to each of our attacks, but doesn't require material components like Hex or Hunter's Mark. And then we'll also get the Channel Divinity Guided Strike, which isn't bad. It'll give us a +10 to an attack roll once per short rest. If we do somehow miss all 3 of our attacks, this should be able to make one of them hit so we can apply our Hands of Harm and our Genie's Wrath. And for spells, I'd pick up Healing Word and Guiding Bolt. We'll usually just be casting Divine Favor, but Healing Word is nice to have if one of our allies falls unconscious, and then Guiding Bolt is something we can do if we get stuck at range. Now that we've kind of got all the pieces of the build put together, I'll be showing our DPR here at level 9 in a few different situations. And then for levels 10 to 15, we're going to be going up to Monk level 11. We'll get Key Empowered Strikes. Our attacks count as magical for overcoming resistances to non-magical attacks. This is good as this is the point in the game where it starts to come up a lot. And then we get Evasion. This is a very strong defensive ability. It makes it so we take less damage or no damage from anything that requires us to make a dexterity saving throw. And then we'll get Purity of Body, another great defensive feature giving us immunity to poison. And then we'll get 2 ability score increases or feats here. I would just take a +2 to dexterity. And then lastly, we'll get Flurry of Healing and Harm from Way of Mercy. This is a great damage increase at no additional key cost. The healing buff is okay, though it's still really only worth using on an unconscious ally. And then for levels 16 and 17, we're going to be taking 2 more levels of Fighter. We'll get Action Surge. It's a nice way to do some burst damage, or if we have to use our first action to do something else, we could use this to let us still attack on that turn when we usually wouldn't be able to. And then for our Martial Archetype, we're going to go with Rune Knight. The main reason we're here is Giant's Might. This is one of the few fighter subclass features that increases damage with unarmed strikes and not just weapon attacks. And then we'll get Rune Carver. I would go with Cloud and Frost Rune, since all of the others take a save DC that's based on our con, and Constitution definitely isn't the main stat we're focused on with this build. And then lastly, for levels 18 through 20, we're going to be taking 3 levels of Cleric here. For spells, the main one we want is Spirit Shroud. It's slightly better in terms of damage than Divine Favor. And then for our last ability score increase or feat, I would just take a +2 to Wisdom. And then here's our DPR at level 20 in a few different situations. You can pause if you'd like to read it. But that's all I have for this build. If you guys would like to check out my last build guide I did called the Ethereal Guardian, it's a tank build that focuses a lot on the Blink spell. You can check that out right here. Either way, thank you guys for watching. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one.